Good evening. We'll begin with Pledge of Allegiance. I invite you to join us. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We didn't have a lot of ceremonies over the weekend on Veterans Day, but I think we need to honor the veterans that did serve in our community and serve us every day. So that will be our bit to say thank you. Roll call, please.
Kolpeck? Here. Pepcorn?
Here.
Preston? Here. Strand? Mahoney?
Here. Is there a motion to approve the order of agenda moving item 22 to the regular agenda?
So second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the October 30th, 2023 regular meeting?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Health. November 16th is recognized as the Great American Smokeout, a great time for someone to start their journey towards a tobacco-free life. Fargo Cass Public Health provides free support and assistance to Cass County residents interested in quitting tobacco. Call the health department for more information, also for chewing as well. Library. A panel discussion centered on Chat GPT and generative artificial intelligence will be November 16th in the main library, and will cover the upsides and downsides of this cutting technology. As some others have discovered, their children can use AI to write their term papers, and it's hard to discover why unless you look at the templates. Those attending will learn some of the benefits of using AI in programming and teaching while hearing about its impact on artists and writers. November is National Model Railroad Month, and the Red River Model Railroad Club will be at the main library to display and demonstrate model trains from November 18th and 19th. And teens can also make holiday ornaments at a workshop November 26th at the Carlson Library. Is there a motion to approve consent agendas 1 through 22 excluding 1 through 44 excluding 22?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Kolpeck? Aye. Preston? Aye. Pepcorn?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. We have no public speakers tonight. I think we'll jump ahead just to 34 because that public hearing is not to start till 5:15. So Nicole Crutchfield, can we talk about the implementation plan for Downtown In Focus Take Action 2023?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. While Scott's logging into his computer here, I will introduce that we have Scott Page with Interface Studio. We hired Scott Interface Studio last year to do a report card status update on the Downtown in Focus plan, which was adopted in 2018. From that report card status update, we found staff and our stakeholders. We've done the low-hanging fruit, and we're about 60% towards the implementation of the Downtown in Focus. But we have friction, if you will, as we look at the rest of the implementation. And Scott's going to introduce us to kind of what the Take Action Implementation Status Report is about, and I'll turn it over to Scott.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Good to see you all again. Just as a quick background, 2018 Downtown in Focus plan had a substantial amount of public engagement. Those recommendations that came through that process are relevant. And what we were asked to do is really take a look at the progress from that report, but then also what's really needed today now that downtown has changed so much in just the past 5 years. So think of this really more as an operational plan. It is not to replace the 2018 plan. It is in addition, and it is there to help us focus and really address some of the barriers towards implementation and focus on some of the key issues today. So in the past 5 years, a significant amount of investment, housing, development, people, downtown has grown, which means the challenges have gotten a little bit more complicated. And that's part of the reason that Fargo, as well as many other cities, are undertaking this kind of work. Right? How do we come out of the pandemic stronger? How do we continue to reinvest in our downtown? How do we address some of the challenges that have emerged in the past few years? To Nicole's point, one of the first things we did was look at all of the actions from the 2018 Downtown in Focus Plan and say, how do we do? Have we implemented them? Are we on the way to implementing them? If we haven't started or haven't had any traction, is it still relevant? And if it's still relevant, let's move that forward. And if it's not relevant, let's talk about what needs to replace it. So quite a bit had been done. But like, again, many other cities after the pandemic, you all had quite a bit of other things to focus on. And so this is the opportunity to take that half step back and say, okay, where are we today for downtown and where do we want to be? So we translated those 85 actions that were in the 2018 plan. We moved them into 4 main buckets or themes. Right? Themes around implementation, right? Who's in charge? Who should be leading each action? What really needs to be organized in order to move these actions forward? Public realm. So how does downtown look and feel? What are some of the critical things that we should be looking to invest in to bring downtown Fargo to the next level? We should be talking about inclusive growth. So that means addressing things like homelessness, mixed income housing, and the needs and opportunities for everyone to live in and near downtown, particularly those that are working downtown. And then some public financing needs. So making sure that we have the resources available to be, in order to take action on many of these different aspects. Within the document itself, which I'm quite proud is very short, short and sweet, there are a few things that we wanted to make sure we covered. There's quite a bit of confusion as to how downtown functions. So who do I call if I have this challenge or this concern? Some of the document actually does lay out very clearly, this is who you need to call if there's a challenge around this kind of issue, or if it's on the sidewalk, or if it's in the street, or if you want to report something. Think of this as kind of a how-to downtown. There's a little bit of that embedded in this document because there were so many questions and people were calling whoever they knew, whether it was in the city or DCP, with a challenge or request, and we wanted to make that a little bit clearer. Within the document, there are 20 actions. So think of those as priorities, 20 actions that are distilled from the larger vision plan. Each action is on a page. This page offers a very clear description of what it is we're hoping to achieve. So whether the actions around housing or public space, what is it we're hoping to achieve? Where are we today? And then the intent there is that the implementation steps help bridge the gap between where we are today and where we want to be. So it's very, very clear in that way, but also think of this document as very much a point in time. This should be a working document, a living document. You all will have files, and those that are working to implement will be working with those files so that they can use those as a tool. This is really just representing where we are at this day and age. The action plan also does bring back quite a bit from the 2018 plan and move it forward because there were so many questions, whether that's about the riverfront plan or some other aspects of how downtown has evolved. Those questions, when they've come up time and time again, we said, okay, let's make sure that we are highlighting this and prioritizing this for discussion as we move towards taking some specific action and making investments. So as I mentioned, there's 20 actions here grouped into those 5 buckets. Think of this as, again, a 5 to 10 year work plan. Some of these things, frankly, have already happened and are happening. That's been the benefit of this process. And some of these things are obviously longer term initiatives, right? If we're talking about reinvesting, particularly in street changes, that takes time. It takes fundraising, it takes time, it takes effort. So we want to be real about the fact that while these are 20 actions, they're not really equal in terms of the level of effort required to make them happen, but they are equal in terms of their importance. One of the things that we have also done in this document is to start to identify the champions for each one of these actions. And so this is a process where we've been reaching out to the folks that, and the different agencies and commissions that play a role in different aspects of downtown, whether that's around public art or housing and homelessness, and make sure that we are including them in this process. We need more than the city to take ownership of this plan. The city has a fundamental and central role to play here, but so does the DCP and all the other organizations that have a very strong stake in downtown and care deeply about its future. So I'm going to very quickly go through these 4 pieces, and then this is that's where I will pause. The document will be available, I think, tomorrow online. So the first theme here around implementation roles is really where we're talking about clarifying the roles for who is managing downtown and in what capacity. It's not just the DCP in the bid, it's also the city and its private property owners. But to really emphasize the need for coordination. So whether that's a downtown coordinator here at the city that can help to mobilize multiple departments to take action around a specific issue or idea, but also quarterly coordination to talk about not just the day-to-day of what's happening in downtown, but the broader ideas, right? If we're looking to really take a move, let's say improve Broadway, for instance, that's going to require some coordination and discussion above and beyond a weekly or monthly meeting. We really need a group that can push the strategic ideas forward and say, how are we doing in implementing the plan? And then, of course, additional coordination around things like programming. Fargo is the benefit of 3 different groups that are actively programming in downtown. You also have the sidebar thing that goes with that, which is you have 3 different groups doing programming in downtown, which just requires more coordination. So it's a benefit that you have folks that are good at programming, that want to bring events to downtown, that bring different folks to downtown. It's a coordination challenge that we want to make sure we're always addressing so that everybody knows exactly what the rules are when it comes to doing events and bringing additional customers to downtown to support the businesses. There's a range of public realm and design needs. I won't go through all of them, but there are a few things that have come up time and time again. Right? Broadway is your central street. It's the street that everyone wants to be on. That street was redone in dramatic fashion 20 years ago. It now needs a little maintenance. We've heard stories about how we need to do a little bit of maintenance and raise some money to address some of the long-term issues that have emerged. But in the context of addressing those maintenance issues, we think it's important to really start to think about what the future of Broadway could be. And that really becomes a process that would be undertaken with DNA and property owners and business owners to look at opportunities to take Broadway to the next level. Other cities are investing in their streetscape in very different ways. And it really does have an impact because people want to be in downtowns that are active, that have a great experience, that provide this kind of an environment. We also talked about Second Avenue and the opportunity to redesign Second Avenue so that it can become a better extension of Broadway Square. So when Broadway Square is programmed, sometimes it can feel small. And the opportunity would be if Second Avenue could be closed easily, you could actually have a bigger space to support a broader range of programming and events, which would be of real benefit to the city. Now, these are ideas that had been developed over the past few years. We're really just bringing them forward in recognition of the success of Broadway Square and the need to really continue to reinvest and support those events. The riverfront has come up quite a bit in terms of what is the future of the riverfront. There are far fewer properties available for development overall in downtown than there were 5 years ago. So the properties that the city does control and the properties that are potentially up for redevelopment in the future really need to be carefully considered. Right? What is it that we're hoping to achieve with the development of these properties? What kind of mix of uses are we looking to really put forward in downtown? And how do we make some very specific physical improvements, City Hall Plaza being a key piece of this? Sodbuster was a nice addition, but there's a lot of this space right out in front of City Hall that could be considered differently, and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. There are great examples around the country of making improvements, both to landscaping, programming, and art, that would help to elevate City Hall Plaza and better connect people over to the riverfront, and really thinking about that experience of moving from Broadway to the river. The piece around inclusive growth, this is a really important point to bring up. We certainly addressed homelessness in the 2018 plan. Every city since then has seen an increase in homelessness, so this is not a uniquely Fargo problem. But there are things that we really need to consider with downtown, whether that's about coming up with a sustainable strategy for the Downtown Engagement Center. I think there's widespread recognition that the building isn't serving the needs of the operators or the tenants, so we need a better solution that would provide a better home for everyone. But we also need to be thinking about how we're addressing long-term homelessness, those that need services, wraparound services, help with medication, or they have a disability and they need other assistance. That becomes a real important aspect of this work, because if we don't have a place for them to go long-term, we end up continually serving them on the street. And that's where the homelessness concerns are often raised across cities, and it's no different here in Fargo. With respect to inclusive growth and housing, there has been this kind of barbell effect happening in downtown, where we have housing that's fairly expensive to rent, and then there's housing that's very affordable because it was built either by the housing authority or partners many years ago, but very little in the middle, right? So if you're a police officer or a teacher or a server, you're a bartender, it can be difficult to find housing options in and near downtown. So if we're really looking to address this challenge, we have to think about ways to expand the resources available to create new housing, to protect the housing that's in the core neighborhoods in particular, the housing that's already affordable and already has a family in them. We want to make sure we're protecting that housing so this problem doesn't get worse. But also looking at potential new resources, right, to invest in housing both in downtown and the surrounding neighborhoods, because that is a shared challenge. And then lastly, public financing, it really is talking about looking at our incentive policies. Are the incentive policies doing everything that they can or should? There's been some confusion about which incentive policies are really promoting the kinds of investment that we want, which incentive policy is best, but also being very, very clear and transparent about your RFP process. If you're going to sell a publicly owned parcel along the river or elsewhere downtown, what are the expectations for how that development should proceed? What are the expectations from the city in terms of how you score developer responses to that RFP? All of those are really critical aspects of thinking through how the financing currently works. I hate to leave money on the table, right? So when there are existing incentives, I want people to maximize the uses of those incentives. And that's one of those things that's important to us as we start to think about this work. And one of the first things we did was to really advocate for more money going to the DCP, because in comparison to other cities, the DCP was under-resourced. And you all have already taken action on that, which is wonderful. And that's the kind of investment that we think is really critical in downtown, as we're thinking about not just the city, but DCP and other partners working together to achieve the vision that you all helped to create 5 years ago and continues today. So with that, in terms of next steps, this is our chance for some public comments. We had a meeting today, a public meeting today, and a number of other discussions where we could get some feedback on this work that many people here have been involved in helping to create. And as I mentioned, there's a number of plan items that have already been moving forward, or certainly there's been dollars requested. So this is a living document. It's already serving that purpose, and that's what we're really gratified to see. Nicole, did I miss anything?
No, thanks, Scott. We're going to have delivery of the hard copies of these. I know they're in your packet. They'll be up in your office tomorrow morning. I have them right here. And then live online, it just went live online on our city website. We have an open public comment period, so we're asking people from the public if they do want to take a look at this and have questions to email our planning department, and then we would be back in front of you in 2 to 4 weeks just to let you know what we've heard from that public process, and then also for you to weigh in if you want to have individual meetings with the planning staff or city administration. We welcome that opportunity as well.
Thank you. Good report. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I did forget we had executive session, and we do have to make an action on that. So it was whether to discuss to participate in the class action settlements involving 3M and DuPont. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chair. I move that the City Commission authorize the city attorney and city administration to prepare, execute, and serve the necessary request for exclusion documents advising that the City of Fargo Public Waste System opts out of the 3M and DuPont proposed class action settlement agreements in the matter of aqueous film forming foams products liability litigation, MDL number 218MN02873.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Kolpak? Aye. Preston? Aye. Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Public hearings. Appeal of the Board Adjustment decision regarding land management permit at 338 9th Avenue South. Scott Lindau to explain.
Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. Thank you. Before you tonight is a public hearing of an appeal of Board of Adjustment decision to uphold an administrative decision on a land management permit at 338 9th Avenue South. One thing to note on page 4 of the packet is titled Appeal of a Board of Adjustment Decision. The correct address is 327 10th Avenue South. That address is directly to the southwest of the 338 9th Avenue South. Thank you, Commissioner Preston, for bringing that up, that clarification. Anyway, a little bit of history and background. Chapter 11-08 of the Fargo Municipal Code allows for over 8 inches in height wildflowers, grasses, and pollinator plants as alternatives to Kentucky bluegrass, as long as there is a land management plan in place on the property. These are actually encouraged and currently exist in several park areas and other private locations. 2 or 3 years ago, the city even initiated a boulevard garden policy that can also include certain plants and pollinators. On June 20th of 23, the property owner at 340 9th Avenue South received notice from Environmental Health to mow the property at 338 9th Avenue South. 338 is a vacant city-owned lot. That triggered some conversations, initially with the Park District, since they have numerous similar sites that have similar landscaping. The closest one to us right now is on the east side of the 2nd Street flood wall. 3 years ago, in 2000, the owners at 340 contracted Prairie Restorations Incorporated, now Minnesota Native Landscapes, to establish wildflower and native grass plantings on this piece of city-owned lot. They had a plan put together and took it upon themselves to proceed. Now, prior to proceeding with any consideration of a land management plan permit, this was discussed, this unique situation, and a bit complicated, with Environmental Health and Public Works. And at that point, it was decided to proceed with the land management plan permit. And at that point, Nancy Morris was also brought in, since it's really needs to have a maintenance and use agreement on it, since again, it is city-owned property. That document is in the works now and has gone through the Public Works Project Evaluation Committee. It hasn't been finalized. We were just kind of waiting pending the outcome of this public hearing. So on June 27th, that land management plan permit application was submitted by the property owner at 340 with the intent and purpose outlined, types of plants, what their plan is for maintenance and management. And on 7/17, after reviewing the requirements of a land management permit application, it was approved. And at that point, per the ordinance, a 200-foot mailing was completed, indicating the approval of that land management plan permit, and also provided opportunities for neighbors to appeal the decision. On August 8th, a written letter of protest was received via email. At that point, it goes to the Board of Adjustment to determine if staff erred in issuing that permit. And on October 24th, the appeal was heard at the Board of Adjustment meeting. All the information was presented, and the decision was unanimous to support the land management plan permit. And on 10/25, an appeal of the Board of Adjustment decision was received by planning. So tonight's suggested motion would be to, excuse me, uphold the Board of Adjustment decision reaffirming the Forestry Department's approval of the land management plan permit at 338 9th Avenue South. And after reviewing all the information and at the close of the public hearing, act to approve or deny the land management plan permit application. And with that, I'll open it up for any discussion or questions.
I first have to do the public hearing. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this appeal? Is there anyone present who wishes to speak? Am I in the understanding the neighbor isn't here tonight?
If they are, they chose not to speak.
Okay. Any questions by commissioners? Mr. Strand?
Thank you. I drove by there a couple times. I couldn't find it. Is it back behind buildings or?
It's set in, it used to be, it was bought out for the levee project years ago. And so it's been maintained as a green space, really on the back side of the property is along 9th Avenue and along 10th Avenue.
But you can't see it from the street. At least I couldn't, or at least I don't think
You
I
have to
could,
walk in there to get a good look at it.
into their private property.
You'd have to cut across, well, you could come at it from the east, from the city buyout property lots, or from the south off of 10th Avenue cul-de-sac. And at that point, you can approach the property.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Preston?
I'm still a little confused, Scott. So is the property owned by the city, but these individuals are maintaining it?
For the last 3 years, in 2000, they initiated putting it into a prairie and native type landscaping.
Okay, but it is owned by the city.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
I have a question.
Mr. Kolpak?
So I understand the original rationale for allowing this kind of natural lot. It is an unusual arrangement. My question is, in the public comments, there was the 10 that signed the letter are concerned about noxious weeds and the maintenance at the end of the year. And right now, they sent a photo that it's dormant, but it wasn't mowed down or burned, I think, which is the maintenance that's required.
Yep.
Can you speak to that, please?
Typically after the third year, and it's also included in what Prairie Restorations originally presented,
Yeah.
that after 3 seasons, the best option is to burn it. In a situation like this where it's surrounded by structures and other things, burning it is really not an option. And so come springtime, the second best option as an alternative would be to mow it.
Okay, thank you. Can I follow up, Mayor?
Go ahead.
And so my question, would it make sense, because my understanding from what you just reported, Scott, is that there is a maintenance and use document being drafted currently
Correct.
for the long term. Can we table this decision until we see that maintenance and use document so we can review it as part of the agreement?
It's up to you, Scott.
I'm okay with that.
So can I make that motion to table this issue until we see the maintenance and use document?
Just one question on that. Would the expectation that would be ready in a couple of weeks, or?
It's already in a draft format. It's gone through the PUPEC review already, so it should be ready. We could have it ready in a couple of weeks.
Okay, and that won't
I
delay
think-
any issue because you're not going to burn it this fall, and you're not
No.
going to mow it till next spring. so
Correct.
Shouldn't interfere with any
Right,
decision.
next meeting. We
So you
could take
moved
it
to
under
table
advisement.
for 2 weeks or 4 weeks?
2.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Pepcorn?
Make a couple comments, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
It's like artwork. Some people's appreciation for wildflowers and prairie grass next to their lawn is not always appreciated. They just see it as, and especially if it's not maintained. So I think the whole thing about having it mowed whenever the option is, I think that's a good thing, because obviously you can't have burning going on in the city of Fargo. But to me, to have, I hope you are considering that, requiring it being mowed every so often.
Yep.
Will that be part of your proposal?
Yeah, and that's already part of their proposed plan.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Preston?
I don't have any trouble with tabling this, but for full disclosure, this is exactly what we do with our lawn. And it's beautiful, actually, but it takes some getting used to. People aren't used to indigenous plants. It's good for the environment. It's good for the soil. It's good for the city. And frankly, I loved what Blue Cross Blue Shield had going on, and then they got rid of it. So I would say we'd encourage this as much as we can.
Motion is to table for 2 weeks. Commissioner Pepcorn?
Just a minor change, just to continue it.
Yes. Sorry,
that
to
makes
continue,
it.
you're right.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yep. Okay.
Roll call, please.
Sorry. Pepcorn?
Aye.
Kolpak? Aye. Preston?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. A lot of reports tonight, Michael. A presentation of the final report on the noise and vibration study. Mike Redinger to tee it up.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for the time this evening to provide an update on this final report. This is a presentation on the noise and vibration study and its final report. There's a brief slide deck tonight that our presenter will be sharing with the commission. And in your packet is the full narrative, the full written report. And you'll recall that this work was initially commissioned back in May of 2023. We wanted to get through an entirety of a summer season so we could identify noise in the downtown area that was occurring when it was warm out and it was seasonal. So what you have here this evening is perhaps the most comprehensive data we've ever had. Cutting across all departments, cutting across various locations around downtown about downtown noise. And I think the other goal, and I mentioned this in the communication that I put together for the packet, we really wanted credible data, not only comprehensive data, but credible data so that we could return to that if we did want to visit on ordinance changes, revisions later down the road. So Venick Lauzon is our contractor. They were awarded the work back in May. They really utilized a methodical approach and very specific proprietary monitoring equipment to calculate our downtown noise and what was occurring there. So Stephen Martin is here this evening. He joined us in person. We thought this is important to brief the commissioners in person on this topic. He is an associate principal at Venick Lauzon, and he's got a few slides this evening to walk through, and we'll tell you a bit about what they found when they were out monitoring the downtown noise and vibration study this summer. So we're happy to have him here. We can talk about next steps at the close of the presentation here, and we'll invite Stephen up. Also want to acknowledge, while he's coming up, the efforts of Captain Chris Helmick of the Fargo Police Department, Tanner Smetshammer of our Finance Department. They also were key staff members helping out with this study from the beginning. So with that, I'll introduce Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening or good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to present our report. Went the wrong direction. There we go. First of all, I would say that my name is Steve Martin. I'm a principal, associate principal with the company. I'm the director of environmental engineering acoustics. I've got 42 years of experience and a PhD in acoustics. Some similar projects that we've done are shown on the board in the first slide here. Several permanent systems that we've installed, some that were temporary for 3 years, some that's still going for 15 years to monitor noise surrounding certain entertainment venues. The picture in the middle of the screen shows the noise monitor that we typically use in our analysis. It's a complicated piece of device, but it's not what's necessary if someone was going to monitor noise for the police department here. But it does a lot of things for us, and we can take the microphone off and put the case in, or put the body of the sound level meter inside a case, which we did for the 3 weeks that we did some measurements here. So we have several challenges, and I want to go over the challenges, the approach, and the resolution. It's similar to work that we did at Universal Studios in Hollywood, where there was occasional public noise complaints due to their Halloween Horror Nights. And in this case, you have a lot of work, a lot of activity on Broadway. And there's a number of noise sources that Hollywood Studios had, just like in the city of Fargo. You've got a lot of length of Broadway with a lot of venues and different venues, different performers that want to perform. So we had to establish some monitoring locations, and fortunately we had more than enough sound level meters to measure permanently for the 3-week period. We put 8 out, and I'll show you locations in a minute. But we utilized those temporarily fixed monitors along with some short-term measurements that we did during the evening to identify what the noise level was at the street level, because the long-term ones were located on roofs to keep them safe and out of the way. And then we also recorded short-term measurements real close to sound sources so we could put those sound source noise levels into a computer noise model and look at the impacts overall and write a report for you. And then we can use this measured data to show the impact of what's going on in the city and look at upgrading codes, noise code, and other enforcement issues. So here's the complaints we've had. The district growth has been great. It's generated increased noise levels, however, and therefore, because it runs a long distance, as shown by the yellow line, we had a long distance to cover in our monitoring. This mixed-use commercial area also includes a number of residential complexes, and the city noise code gives you a noise limit for each different zoning requirement, commercial, residential, and industrial. If I step back and look at that, it's shown here, it's summarized on the screen, where commercial downtown is 65 during the daytime and 60 decibels during the nighttime. If you were off in a residential area by itself, it would be 55 and 50, and the industrial noise levels don't apply to this project. So how do we determine the correct noise level? Because we've got this mixed use area downtown, combination of commercial and residential. So the city advertised the RFP, and we have completed our detailed measurements, performed an analysis, and I'd like to summarize the report for you today and provide some future capabilities or future things that need to be done for solving this problem. Now, the map doesn't fit on the screen properly, so the left side is the northern part of Broadway and the right side is the southern portion. You can see that the Jasper Hotel is the junction of the two. So if you slid the right side underneath the left side, you'd have the whole Broadway area. This diagram shows where we put our long-term measurements in the yellow, and then we did some short-term measurements close by to be able to compare noise at the ground level with what we were measuring up on the roof. And then we also, let me show you, here's some pictures of the noise monitors we used. Took the microphone off, ran a cable up and put it on a tripod or on a long pole. And you can see here's two more pictures near Broadway Square and the cinema. Then during an evening, during several evenings, we went out and we made short-term measurements as well as measurements of sound sources. We looked at street performers, we looked at venues that are permanent, and we measured noise coming out of them so we could put them into this computer model to give us a good, here it is here. This is the noise contour that came up at a 2-meter height. The computer model takes all the sound sources we put in, adds them up, and gets the composite noise contours as the sound is generated or propagated away from those locations where the sound sources were located. Then we could use the long-term data to calibrate the model to make sure things are correct. And in the report, you'll see that we've got several different heights that the noise model allows us to predict how loud it is and what those contours look like. So this gives you a little idea what's going down in the downtown area. You see the dark blue or purple areas. Those are hot spots where there's a performer or a venue that was measured during our 3-week measurement period. Then we also took a look at, compared in the table here, noise levels of each sound source, who the sound source was, and compared it to the long-term and the short-term measurements to make sure that we were verifying the source noise levels before they were put in the computer noise model. Here you can see that the loudest noise levels are produced by a street performer at LT4, District 64, plus there may be another establishment next door that's causing some noise. And Broadway Square has some significant noise levels operating under a permit. And the rest of the table is shown on the second slide. And where it says Cowboy Jacks, I have to, there's a typo there. That's 71.8 that's shown right in the middle. That's actually a street performer, not Cowboy Jacks. Didn't want to give them a bad name. Now, during our measurement period, the city actually received several noise complaints. 2, 4, 5 of them are shown here. The sixth one occurred from some noise that was happening behind a building and wasn't facing Broadway, so we had no way to compare that noise. But what we did, we looked at the address of the complaint and its location reference to the long-term monitor and where the address was, and we came up with a probable decibel level in the far right column. Now, these complaints are kind of generated from two types. One's a general noise complaint, and the other three are street performers performing. And on the right-hand side, you'll see that the numbers in red, 67, 70, and 67, are the street performer noises. The other noises, 84 and 83, those are either people traveling along the street, talking and making noise, or a loud exhaust of a car driving down the street. So in concluding this, the complaint table, as I said, had two different sources of noises, but each complaint was due to noise that exceeded the 65 decibels found in your noise code. And Bennett Clausen's experience with cities, we've had many cities that we've worked for, dealt with, and many of them have commercial district sound level limits of 65 dBA during the daytime and 60 at nighttime, just like City of Fargo's current noise ordinance. So therefore, we would recommend that the probable enforcement level of 65 dBA is correct, and that 65 dBA is an average noise level. As you and I know, music, as you play it, it goes up and down, it varies, but it has an average level, and as those increases or those ups and downs in the music happen, they usually vary plus or minus 5 decibels to maybe plus or minus 10 decibels at the most. And we also know that vehicles, as they get closer, they get louder, and as they go away, they get a little quieter. Well, typically the noise reduction afforded by a building where the residences are living, residential structures, provides a minimum of 20 decibels of reduction. So if we limit to 65 outside, that gives us a 45 dB average inside. Sleep disturbance is typically considered by normal people to occur at 55 decibels, which is 10 dB above the 45, and that's about the variation in the noise level. 45 plus 10 would give you 55. This is also why 60 dBA nighttime outside level is good, because it allows an additional cushion for preventing sleep deprivation. So the noise code, one of the things the noise code needs to be done is updated not with the noise level changes, but to define the procedures needed for the measurement process and to determine and define clearly what a noise violation occurs. Also, to ensure that the downtown district residential area is considered in the noise code as a commercial, not residential property. And then enforcement options, as typically done now. An officer, when they get a complaint, they drive down and they investigate the complaint. And in the future, after some training, they should be able to measure the noise levels to ensure that yes, it's a violation, or no, it's not. An additional suggestion, there's a proactive measure that could be used as an option. If there are certain areas where you're certainly concerned about noise levels, you could put up a permanent monitoring station, and what that would do is when the levels reach a certain level, it can send a text or an email to the appropriate person to let them know something's going on here. And maybe after he receives a few of those, he says, okay, there must be something going on. let me go out there and check. You can do that before he gets a complaint. Another thing that we recommended in the report was the idea of, for permanent venues, adding a sound limiter to the amplification system. That way you can measure the noise outside while they're playing indoor music, whether windows are open or windows are closed or doors open, doors closed, whatever they plan to do. And the limiter can be set so that the outside noise level at the property line doesn't exceed the 65 decibels. That's basically the
Questions or
study in a
comments from the commissioners?
nutshell.
Commissioner Stratt.
I would like a definition of decibels and how the progression of decibels go up relative to sound. It's not linear, as I understand it.
It's not linear, it's logarithmic.
So help us understand that.
Typical noise level of somebody talking to you at 3 feet away is about 60 decibels. If if you had two people talking at 60 decibels, it's not 120 decibels. It's actually only 66 decibels because two sources added together increase it by 6. If I wanted something that was twice as loud as 60, it would be 70 decibels. So subjectively, a 3 dB change is barely noticeable by probably a normal person almost in a lab setting. It's hard to tell 3 dB change. But a 5 dB change is a significant change that everyone can recognize, and a 10 dB is doubling the sound level. Does that help?
Thank you.
I guess so. Commissioner Pipgard.
Can I ask a question? So one of them, the locations was Cowboy Jack's, and so the railroad tracks are right there. So did you measure, what is the noise of the train that goes by? Did you measure that at that time?
No. We didn't measure it because it wasn't part. I mean, the monitors caught it. If the train went by, obviously, over 3 weeks, there had to be a train. But we didn't look at it because it wasn't part of our study. We could tell what that was, and we were only looking at noise caused by the venue.
No, I was just curious. So I'm in charge of dumb questions. So that was but the other question I have for you is, so would you say that our levels are appropriate and common? Other towns have the same regulations. So would you say they're from your experience, they are good numbers?
I would say the 65 and the 60 are good numbers. There are some cities that allow slightly higher and some that, believe it or not, West Hollywood and Beverly Hills in California, some popular destinations that have a lot of entertainment nightlife, they have it even stricter. Some of them only require no more than 55 at night. Some of them, West Hollywood in case, they say noise cannot be audible outside. So we have one of the ones that I showed you as a past example, forget the name of the hotel, but they have an outdoor venue on top of the roof, and we've got a monitor because they have speakers, 4 speakers on the roof pointing down, and we've got a monitor outside to make sure that the noise doesn't exceed a certain amount that would cause it to be audible down at the street level.
So just one more, and then so are you recommending? So like, let's say our police officers have a monitor with them, and then it'll just say you're within the sound level or not. Is that what you recommend? Something along that line?
Yes, definitely.
Commissioner Preston.
So I live actually right across from Cowboy Jack's and right next to the railroad tracks. And the railroad tracks don't bother us. And I think it's a matter of just getting used to that, probably as a regular kind of occurrence. But I have to say, Cowboy Jack's wakes up my daughter whenever she's visiting. And in fact, one night she went over there and asked them to turn it down at about midnight. So there is an issue with noise coming from there. The second thing, and maybe Michael, this is more of a question for you. This is really helpful because it tells us that our noise levels are probably appropriate. it's the enforcement side. And I'll ask the question again because I asked it earlier. Is there another option besides police officers as enforcers? So that, because so oftentimes, I believe, by the time a police officer responds, the person's gone. And I have to say also one more thing. Yesterday, I was walking along Broadway, and literally, we heard a street performer 2 blocks away, and it sounded like he was right here. So, yeah, I mean, it's an issue for sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Preston. That's a great question. And I think one of the pieces that Stephen highlighted that may be an opportunity for us is the use of technology to try to govern some of that sound coming out of a licensed establishment that perhaps could self-govern their sound or send us an alert. That's technology that frankly we were not aware of before doing this study. That could be something that we could look at with ordinance revisions. I think that if the commission was interested in next steps, the Bennett-Glasen scope of work has now been completed. They were simply just collecting data and measuring what we were seeing in downtown. But if the commission was interested, I wrote down to myself too, I think that the direction to staff and the attorney's office would be to look at appropriate ordinance revisions, look at some of these technology pieces, as well as perhaps model ordinances elsewhere. That is something we could continue work in an addendum or a different scope of work with Bennett-Glasen or others to try better understand how communities have tried to get at this. There are some much more restrictive communities than what we would likely approve here. I think the thing that was assuring to hear was that there isn't anything that is really flawed with our current decibel levels in ordinance. We're not far off, but if you combine some louder street performers with a couple of louder licensed establishments, that really isolates our issue. We didn't really get vehicles, trains, other things that came out of the data. It's much more defined than that. So I think if the commission was interested, we would recommend that we be directed to look at some of those additional opportunities from other communities. And I would like to continue work with this vendor if possible.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask one more question. I forgot to ask. The vehicle noise, because that's so sporadic and it's so loud, is that part of the ambient noise that you were measuring? And how is that taken into consideration? I didn't see much about vehicle noise here.
We measured it because we had the continuous monitoring going on. It wasn't something that first of all, the first week that we were here making measurements of sound sources was during the fair, and there was no street traffic at that time. Second time we were here, there was some street traffic, but nothing that really caught our attention as it drove by as a loud source. It is very sporadic. So yes, it's difficult to enforce, difficult to mitigate. I will say one other suggestion that I mentioned, and it's not probably a good option because most people like to have their windows open during the summer. But one of the things you can do is increase the noise reduction of a window, get a better window in the residential areas. Just food for thought. If you wanted to do something like that, and then those that can handle the noise when they open the windows and it doesn't bother them, because people are so different. Some people, if the airport noise doesn't bother them, they live close. A lot of times it's either because they're hard of hearing or they are involved with business at the airport, and when they hear the noise, it reminds them they got a job. Other people, they can't stand the noise and it bothers them. That's the problem with acoustics. We've got the technical side of it, and then we've got the subjective side of it.
One more comment. Michael, if I could make a suggestion that you look for other options that other cities have implemented in regards to the vehicle noise. I find that just as disturbing because it's so sporadic and it sounds like gunshots sometimes. So it's real alarming when you hear it, and it goes on all night long. So, if you could look for some other options that other cities have done there would be helpful.
Very good. Thank you. And I should note too that there was no recommended action of the commission this evening. We just wanted to have you hear this presentation first. If you are interested in moving us forward to some additional research or some additional ordinance research, we're happy to do that and support the commission however you would like to proceed moving forward.
Commissioner Kolpak.
Yeah, that was my question. You answered it, Michael, was what are our next steps here? And I would add, this did take some time, and we've continued to hear from citizens, especially downtown. So, acting on this and coming back to the commission with recommendations would be my request.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you. Michael, I'm not sure if you or Captain Helmick could answer this question, but it was my impression we were enforcing after 10 o'clock at night, not 11 o'clock at night. And at 11 o'clock at night is the cutoff for sound on Fridays and Saturdays. Are we enforcing after 10 o'clock at night on Fridays and Saturdays?
I will ask Captain Helmick if he could address the law enforcement side of that question. So thank you for the question, Commissioner.
Evening, Commissioners. To answer your question, Commissioner Strand, there's a couple of different ordinances in play here. The first one is the street performer ordinance that prohibits performing after 10 o'clock. And that is the primary ordinance that we've been enforcing with the street performers this year while we work through the noise ordinance.
So it does not mirror the noise ordinance,
Correct.
which needs to be addressed.
Yes.
Yes.
I would agree with that.
Let me, if you don't mind, the folks who are performers are saying, well, we're no noisier than that bar. It's noisier, in fact, than we are. How does this land in our analysis that the establishments that have noise filtering out into the street, along with the performers who have noise out in the street?
A question for me?
I
Whoever.
think so.
Sure. So you can see if we look at District 64, it's got a level of 63 decibels at one location and 67 at another. That could have been District 64 and the adjacent venue next to it. What we could do is we can set a limiter in their system and tell them, if you're going to play with doors open, windows open, or whatever, even with doors closed, we need a limiter in there so that outside we limit it to the 65. Once you limit the venue, the permanent venues to that 65 using that limiter, so they can turn up the volume all they want. It's not going to get any louder because it's set. Then you can also adjust the street performers with their individual stuff.
My sense is our performers would appreciate that balanced approach because they feel they've been targeted,
Sure.
compared to the others. Another question I'm not sure I'm gleaning out of this, and it's more of a legal term, but there's a speech First Amendment aspect of this whole process with amplifiers and with communicating. And if you have somebody on a street corner giving speeches like the old days, how do amplifiers and First Amendment rights, speech rights, protected speech rights fit into our approach?
That's a question for the lawyers.
You must have addressed this in other cities.
No, it has not come up.
So Commissioner Strand, thank you for that follow-up. And what I would suggest is if that was a particular interest, I added legal research to my list of to-dos. If we were to proceed with additional work in this space, we would certainly spend time with the city attorney's office to make sure that any kind of ordinance revisions obviously are going to remain compliant with the First Amendment and additional case law that has since emerged on this topic. So thank you for that suggestion. That would be added to our list of follow-up topics if we were to look at ordinance revisions, certainly.
If I might, another thing we should consider is the fines and application of the fines. When we have one citizen who's claims he had a $1,000 fine for playing an unplugged amp after 10 o'clock at night, and so the fine or enforcement needs to be looked at in the bigger picture too.
Duly noted. Thank you, Steve. Excellent report. We've been waiting for this for a long time. I don't know how long this wait has been, but it's been a while, so we're really pleased we finally have it. But it still needs work, Mike, as you said, so we could do that. Commissioner Strand, anything else?
Last thing I'll say is let's really engage with the businesses and the citizens and the performers as well going forward.
Any other comments, discussion? Thank you.
Thank you.
Presentation of the recommended federal and state aid transportation project applications for the years of 2024 to 2028. Jeremy Gordon to re-explain.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Good to be in front of you again tonight. The item at hand here is just a draft list of projects that we want to show you. Tonight's just for information only. We'll come back in 2 weeks for your blessing on these to send to MetroCog. So this year, in previous years, I've come in front of you a number of times. Like there'll be 3 applications due this month and 4 due next month. This is all the kit and caboodle right now. So with a little luck, you won't see me for another year on this topic. So this is a laundry list. These are all unfunded projects, but they're staff recommendations from a number of plans that we've been working on. So there's 8 programs. The first one is a new state fund that the last legislative session came out with. We are eligible for 42 million. Well, the state, townships, counties, cities. I don't know if the DOT's eligible or not, but there's 42 million statewide under that new pot of money. That's for projects for next year and the year after. Number 2 is transportation alternatives. That's for paths. That could also be used for safe routes to school projects. That's for years 26 and 27. We have right around $1 million annually with that program. The carbon reduction, you can use those for paths as well. And then this year we're going to ask for some traffic signal, adaptive technologically advancements for our signals. There's about a little over $1 million there locally annually. Number 4 is the urban grant program for projects specifically for downtown. That'll be for 2027, and there's a decent pot of money statewide, but it's $4.5 million. Number 5 is the urban regional. That's the 10th University, 52nd Avenue South, 19th Avenue North, Main Avenue. Just think of this, we have 17 or 18 miles of that type of road in town that we cost share with the DOT. Now that competes statewide. I don't know what the statewide pot of money is, but they like to, each district, they've got 8 districts. They like to put the same amount of money in each district on these types of roadways, I believe. Next one is our surface transportation block grant. That's the one that funds the majority of our arterial roadways. It's $10.5 million. We use that almost every year on our projects. The last 2 are safety. The one is just a general highway safety program that competes statewide too, but they've got a good pot of money statewide for those projects. That's for 2028. And the last one is a highway/railroad crossing safety program. I think they usually get $1 million to be used statewide. So, all these federal aid projects, state aid project applications, they come from our long range plan. We've got 8 goals. I won't go through that. So the pot of money, we'll get into each pot of money. So the flex fund projects, it's pretty exciting. As part of the application, these are the items that they're interested in seeing: economic development, safety, complete streets, multimodal. And then the roadway restriction, is it too narrow or too tall or too short? And is it innovative? So the first project we can think of is the NP Avenue corridor. This money really should have the state should have a short fuse for it to get it spent in the next couple of years. So we think next year's project from 8th Street to Broadway would be a good idea, and then just moving east from Broadway to 4th Street and eventually the river. So you can see those projects are $14 million total. We'll think about asking for around $10 million. So the next list, I'll just go through these quickly. Interrupt me if you'd like. This is the Transportation Alternatives Program list. We're doing a really good job knocking out the path projects that we've identified around town. So the first 3 are along drains. Drain 27, Deer Creek neighborhood in the southwest part of the city. That's a $1.5 million project. It's long been sought after, but we just can't get it funded. The next one will be extending the shared use path in Drain 53 down by Davies High School. And then the next one is a low-level pedestrian crossing in the drain to get from one side to the other. That's at 58th Avenue South. And the last one is with the problem that the path is having at the river next to the wastewater treatment plant. Half the path is sliding into the river. This last one would give basically folks up on the north side an alternative way to get to where they're going with that path failure. So these are the three. Deer Creek is on the left, Drain 53 is on the right, and then that short little low-level crossing is just above that. So carbon reduction program, this year we're bidding out actually this week we're bidding out the streetlight replacement project. So paths are also eligible for this. So the first two I just talked about. And the last one will be making our traffic signals on 45th Street more responsive to traffic conditions. So what you need to do is really improve the detection, the vehicle detection. So it'd be 15 intersections. It's pretty high tech. We do have the capability to do it. We're doing it now on 5 intersections as a trial up on 12th Avenue North. So we'd like to throw that in the mix for this funding. So the next pod is a downtown urban grant. So we applied for this last year. What we'd like to do is replace the bricks in the street at 3 of the intersections, 2nd, 4th, and 6th, as well as to make a number of ADA sidewalk issues with the street.
And when you say brick replacement, is the thought of not necessarily doing bricks in the future, but concrete stamped?
No, I think people are pretty particular about the bricks. That is a good idea, but I think whenever we touch Broadway, basically everybody wants it to be put back just the way it was. I tried striping a crosswalk with just tape and got some pushback, and we didn't do it. So fool me once, shame on me.
But is there any adaptations we've had over time in engineering or whatever so they don't deteriorate that badly?
Yeah, I don't know if you recall in 2013, we replaced 2 of the intersections, NP and at First. We used a different brick. In the underlayment, I think we did a better base. So we have got better.
So it will be better.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So this one is a laundry list of those urban regional, the 10th University. We wanted to get this in front of the DOT to say, hey, you've got 17 miles here. If concrete only lasts 30 years, you should be replacing a mile every other year. So the first two are basically our highest priorities. Replacing South University just north of the interstate for a mile. That's an expensive project. You can see 31 million. And then the next one is a 2-mile stretch of just concrete pavement repair on Main Avenue from 25th Street to 45th Street. So basically these are 10th and University projects. Those corridors are both getting pretty old. The concrete's 40 to 50 years old in some stretches. And anything that we're looking at with the 10th and University corridor studies could be implemented when we come to reconstruct them. So this is for $2028.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Preston?
could I just ask a question there, Jeremy?
Yeah.
So just remembering the controversy around University Drive South and are you talking 2028 would be the start of the design? How and when would the neighborhood be able to provide input on the design?
That would hopefully be constructing in 2028.
Okay.
So what'll happen is we bring this to MetroCog, we put them at the DOT. They come out with a list in the summer to say, hey, you're pegged for this money in 2028.
Okay.
So then these projects here, the DOT is actually in charge of the environmental document and the public process. So it would be in the year 24, 25, they'd get going.
Okay.
So they'd have plenty of time. And we're well aware of
I know you are.
how sticky that area is.
I appreciate seeing all of these together. I think it's easier to grasp what you're doing and where you're going with it. So thank you.
Well, that's good. Unfortunately, this isn't very graphical to let you guys see a nice, beautiful picture. But coming in front of you a number of times will help. So I should add, these do coincide with Tom's 4-year CIP that he talked about last week. So, so the federal project's a really good program for the 5th year out. So they roll into the out year on the CIPs. So it allows us time to get those funded. So I just got a couple more left here. So safety projects. No, I'm sorry. Surface transportation block grant. So this is our big pot of money that we usually like to spend. So there's 2 corridors that we're really addressing. 17th Avenue South, basically from University to 42nd Street. There's 2 projects that we've identified. And then in the downtown area, if you drive First Avenue North, it's in rough shape. So, and it's going to be an expensive rebuild. So there's 2 segments on here. There is going to be a third in the future year. But from 3rd Street, basically from here to Roberts would be one, and from Roberts to 10th would be another. You can see those. 17th Avenue, that's an aging corridor. The purple one on the right is, we do have money for that, slated for 2027. So the highway safety, we've got 3 projects. The intersection on 52nd Avenue and 27th Street, we'd like to put in a reduced conflict U-turn or a J-turn. That would be high on the list. A pedestrian safety project, University Drive and 25th Avenue South, really to correct the sidewalk issue there. On the west side, it's pretty difficult to follow the sidewalk north and south. And the last one will be a little widening on 45th Street right at 95. So here's that intersection I talk about. It's a local street coming up to 52nd Avenue. It's not really appropriate to put a traffic signal in there between the 2 that are on the left and right of it. So what we'd like to do is do something like this. So we've installed these on 52nd Avenue west of the highway. And then the University Drive pedestrian safety would be cleaning up that southwest corner by Bell Bank there, making this sidewalk a lot more intuitive and potentially setting the stage for a path going east and west on 24th Avenue to tie the river trail to Milwaukee Trail, bike trails. And then the last, I think, pardon the graphics here. This is an engineer doing graphics. But if you can imagine, there's 3 lanes today southbound on 45th Street. This would just get a 4th lane. You can see the hatched out area would be pretty simple to do. And there's a lot of rear end crashes all the way from Shields Sports all the way down to here. So this would help a hair. And then the last thing is the Highway Railroad safety project. Believe it or not, we are growing in this area. The horse park is just the oval underneath the dot there. 19th Avenue and 57th Street. We'll be paving under the dot in the next year or 2 with the plats that have come in and there's a couple of them that are coming in. So just to summarize, these are the projects north of Main. There's a number of them. And south of Main. So they're all over the city. And the longest one would be the 45th Street Sigma project. So with that, any questions?
Any questions, Jeremy? Mr. Strand?
Thank you, Jeremy. Your comments about the 45th Street Signal Project and technology makes my brain want to know, can we incorporate this technology with other technologies like desire for traffic management, speed management, law breaking, racing? Is there any crossover with these technologies that we can work with law enforcement and get a lot more bang for the buck potentially?
I don't know about law enforcement, but so like on a corridor like 45th Street, I think so. That's there's 15 signals. I think there's probably 14 of them that we've got. We've got day plans for coordination, north and south, and you can set them so the speed limit. So you get a green light here. You don't get a green light too far in advance of when your speed limit should get there, or your traveling speed should get there. There are some probably smaller things, but it's really just for efficient movement of vehicles.
And that I understand, but I'd be curious if other government subdivisions anywhere have done anything while you're doing it.
Yeah.
Incorporate those technologies into the retrofit.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that.
Any comments or questions?
I have one more, Mayor. Sorry. Are you done?
Yep.
Okay, let's talk the North Broadway Bridge,
Yep.
if you don't mind.
It's not the topic tonight, though, John. It's not on your plan.
It's on here.
No, that's on that's the federal aid project that's programmed. That was just the Broadway bricks.
North Broadway Bridge, $5.4 million in federal aid, 2026. I'm just reading the memo, but the very bottom of the first page.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we can talk about.
Well, I guess here's my question.
Yeah.
If there were no bridge there ever at all, and we were looking at where we want to put a bridge relative to needs and uses, like a zero-based budgeting type approach to bridges. I'm curious if that bridge would be doable or justifiable or not with 3,000 traffic flow per day.
It probably wouldn't.
That's what I want to know is what's our criteria for when you decide to build a bridge, not just replace an existing bridge, but if we were going to build from scratch and nothing exists, I'm just wanting to know what our approach would be relative to the actual needs.
Yeah, when we closed Broadway, we took a long, hard look at, is that the best place for a river crossing? In North Fargo, another good spot would be 32nd Avenue North. That would go east and west into Moorhead. And we brought that up with the city of Moorhead, and they wanted nothing to do with us examining it. So, these bridge crossings are pretty political at times as well. But I would say section line roads is where they really should be.
Okay.
But on that note, since you brought it up, that is programmed to receive federal money in 2026. So depending upon what you guys do in 2 weeks, the existing projects may shuffle a bit. We can always change what's programmed as well. So just like the 17th Avenue corridor, if Broadway is a no-go, that logically could fall into that spot. And usually the federal aid,
you could drop to 12th Avenue Bridge.
yes, it's up to you guys.
But, excuse me, Mr. Chair, I
should
will
go
just
back.
add, since this wasn't specifically on the agenda, I think getting the data and to make that decision is going to be really important, including what we asked for from the public. So,
Yeah, that you guys will be interested to know. We sent out over 7,600 postcards on Thursday. If you live north of Maine and east of University, you're going to get a postcard probably today, and you'll get a link to a survey on SurveyMonkey. So I expect thousands of comments.
thank you.
Very good. We'll take a 4-minute break, come back at 6:20. We'll come back in session. Item 37, recommendation to adopt the resolution directing the issuance of 42 million refunding improvement bonds, Series 2023D, and prescribing the terms and covenants thereafter. Susan Thompson to explain.
Hello, Commissioners. Today, the city sold bonds, $42 million worth of refundable improvement bonds, and we have Brad Elmer with Baker Tilly to discuss the bond sale, and he's here for questions if you have any as well.
Thanks, Susan. So Brad Elmer with Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors. I work with the city when you issue municipal bonds. So thank you very much for the opportunity to do that. We did have a successful sale this morning. You received 13 bids on the bonds. JP Morgan was the winning bidder with a true interest cost of 4.32%. So very competitive sale and a great rate. About 100 basis points lower than we would have predicted a couple months ago when we started putting this transaction together. So congrats on a great sale. As part of the bond issuance process, the bonds were rated by Moody's Investment Services. Susan, I will say, just did an absolutely fantastic job with the rating agency and on those rating calls, to the point that when Moody's delivered the bonds, they expressed their confidence in Susan and indicated that was a big part of you holding your rating at a AA2 stable outlook. So I think that's probably the first time a rating agency's ever said that to me. So you're definitely in good hands here with Susan. So there was a pretty lively discussion with the rating agencies. They are very focused in on reserves and fund balances. So I'd encourage you all, as you move forward, to keep an eye on those things as well. They have kind of ticked down a little bit in recent years, and to the extent that those could be built up, I know that will be looked at positively by the rating agencies. So congrats on a great sale. And
So Brad, congratulations on that. There's been talk of how the city's done on its rating. And as far as I know, this has been fairly consistent. AA2, is that what you say?
Yep, that's correct. It has
And
been
we've
fairly-
consistently been that. I know at one time it went up to a 1, but that was kind of a different rules that Moody had, and now we've maintained this. But for the public to know, we've maintained a very solid rating, and Susan did a great job. When she talks to Moody, she reports how the city of Fargo is doing, and they continue to have confidence in the city and how it's doing. Is that correct?
That's correct. And a AA2 is a very strong rating, so.
And it's a great rate. Thank you for doing that when we're below what we're expected to be. That really helps us. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Just clarification,
Kolpak?
yes, it's from a Moody's reclassification of their grading system, correct? Would be accurate to say that? That we stayed, that one time it changed from an AA1, AA2 as their reclassification.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. Roll call vote, please.
Strand,
Yes.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Kolpak,
Aye.
Preston, Mahoney,
Aye. 38, first reading ordinance amending sections 13-1801, 13-1802, 13-1806 of Article 13-18 of Chapter 13 of the Fargo Municipal Code relating to massage therapy establishments. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Kolpak,
Aye.
Preston,
Aye.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Strand,
No.
Mahoney,
Aye. Item 39, first reading of the ordinance amending section 1-0305, A1 of Article 1-03 of the Chapter 1 of the Fargo Municipal Code related to classification of ordinance violations. Do I have a motion?
Make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Strand?
Thank you, Mayor. I have just a simple question, but do any of our ordinances or policies lead to felonies?
No.
Thank you.
Roll call vote, please.
Preston,
Aye.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Kolpak,
Aye.
Strand,
Yes.
Mahoney,
Aye. You have my recommendations for appointments to the following commission, the Human Rights Commission and the Native American Commission. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments? Roll call vote, please.
Strand,
Yes.
Preston,
Aye.
Kolpak,
Aye.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Mahoney,
Aye. 41, you have applications for property tax exemptions made to buildings. We have quite a few this time. A lot of people are remodeling, I guess. Do I have a motion?
So second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Kolpak,
Aye.
Preston,
Aye.
Strand,
Yes.
Mahoney,
Aye. Item 22, it is the 2023 budget adjustments. Susan Thompson to explain.
Hello again. This item correlates to the quarterly report that we did two meetings ago. I apologize. I intended to have it last meeting and just missed the deadline. Going forward, I'd like to bring this along with the quarterly report so we can sort of talk about it and get it approved in conjunction. It's page 108 if you want to put it up there, but it doesn't really lend itself to the video, so I apologize. I wasn't planning to talk about it. It's just a lot of lines. What I did want to talk about, though, is this kind of shows you the depth of the analysis that we did as part of our quarterly review. We did pretty deeply dive into the revenues and the expenses. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll just mention a couple, same ones that we talked about when we actually did talk about the quarterly report. So this will be adjusting our budget so that it better aligns with where we think the actuals, and this will help us as we look at year-to-date going forward. So a couple items on the very top, the franchise fees that we talked about during the budget process. Those will be effective as of November 1st, so we want to make sure that we're reflecting that, those 2 months in this budget. A little further down with our government revenues, municipal highway funds, I think that budget was just a little optimistically high. We'll be trending that going forward as we do budgets. We'll look at that a little closer. A little farther down in the middle, the special assessment CIP, there's a few different CIPs. So as a city, we charge an administrative fee on different projects, and that really just depends on what kind of projects we have. We had a very busy year, so those are trending higher. We'll work a little closer with engineering going forward to make sure that we're budgeting that appropriately on an annual basis. On the second page, there's a couple other things. We talked about interest income. Obviously, with interest rates higher, we're earning more interest than we would have imagined when we set the budget last year. We had talked about the budget included the sale of some assets that we know are not going to happen, so we want to make sure we remove that so we're not anticipating that revenue that we know is not going to come. And then the very last item, there was a transfer in from the debt service, and we don't have any maturing bonds, so we're not having any cash coming in. So that is a total of $2 million of revenues. That's less revenues, but then at the very end, we're also looking at our expenses. In this case, we just looked at salary savings. So knowing that we have a lot of vacant positions, and we did talk about this during the budget process, the way we have to budget is to assume every single FTE works every day, and we know that that's not the case. So we kind of bake in, as you can see, some salary savings already. So this is projecting through, this is only through third quarter, $4 million of savings. We already had $2 million kind of baked into the budget, so there's a negative net $2 million. So they basically offset each other, but this will do some house cleaning. So when you get the next financials, the budget will be a better reflection of where we think we're going to be. Anybody have any questions?
Mr. Preston?
Just one question. Appreciate this. First of all, it gives us, I think, a much better sense of perhaps where we are. Was the budget for 2024 based on the budgeted amount indicated here before these adjustments, or what was pulled into 2024 budget?
Some of them were, some of them trend. I think that's been a couple months now. So I think the state aid, I think we did budget that down, knowing that there was some trending. We don't have an asset sale in there. We did bump the interest revenue up a little bit, anticipating that interest rates will continue to rise. So where we had some history and trends, we did build that into next year. But when we do the first quarter analysis of next year, I'll be looking ahead at the actuals and try to adjust it so we can plan for that throughout the year.
Okay, thank you.
I think the budget team has more experience for next year. It will be much better to do that, and eventually we'll get the software and the computerware that really will help us as well. But a lot of these are Susan making phone calls and trying to figure out what to actually spend. Mr. Strand?
Susan, I'm just curious, and I think I've asked you before, but help me understand again. How aggressive are we at going after these momentary high CD rates?
We have a really good program in place right now. Kent put it in place. It's a governmental program that he's working through one of the regional banks. So we basically have an overnight sweep that's paying us what a lot of these CDs are. So rather than having our staff pick apart and put a couple million here and a couple million there, we don't chase that. We manage it with a company that can kind of meet all of our needs. So right now, the yield curve's inverted, so having overnight money is actually paying us what a longer term is. As that flips, that's something we'll probably want to look at as our strategy. But right now, what we're doing is actually paying us really well.
How close is that strategy to the current market of 5.1% or so for interest?
That's what we're making now.
That's what we're making now. Because somebody's asked me, I said, I don't know, but so we're getting that already.
We're getting that on an overnight sweep.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Strand, you talked about the diversion. They're doing the same thing. They're in the sweep we're in as well. So we keep abreast of that. And if you look at the interest rates right now, that interest is helping a lot of entities.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Liaison Commissioner updates. Commissioner Pepcorn.
No update, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Preston.
None for me either.
Mr.
I have
Kolpak.
one slide, and it's the result of a lot of work that was diligently done by the water treatment plant over the year. And they've been closely monitoring this so that when they implement it, they will be compliant with the state. And per usual, I'm sure they will be. So as of November 1st, ultraviolet water treatment system is fully operational, and I've shared this before. And it shines UV light through drinking water to further disinfect the water that has already been softened and filtered. And as I said, they've worked closely with regulators and consulting engineers for several years to design and construct this UV system that further improves water quality for our customers. We meet on this monthly, and it's just really impressive that it's now functional. So thank you.
Could you just comment to the public? Sometimes they wonder about these forever chemicals, which we did discuss earlier tonight. Can you just explain what our levels are in city water?
0
Yeah.
on some of these forever chemicals. So basically, undetectable is probably a better word, a more,
Because we have such a great system.
right. And we're able to just toggle back and forth between the membrane plant and the lime processing plant. That one is better when we're depending on the source of water. So we've done a really good job.
Thank you.
They've done a really good job, not me. Not me.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to just briefly acknowledge this week I will be attending the National League of Cities. And I'm a member of about a 30-member federal committee that deals with human development. So I will have an intense focus on issues close to home, homelessness, substance abuse, and topics like that, affordable housing. And I look forward to coming back from my peers, our peers at the national level, and sharing what I can share. I'd also like to mention that a week ago, I was honored to be invited by the Auschwitz Institute on Genocide Prevention. I spent 5 days in intense learning experience. I was one of 24 in the country. That is their first ever program like this. And this was not on our nickel. It was an invite from them. But looking at genocide and identity-based violence, and I can't even begin to express how deep a topic that is and how relevant it is here at home. But it was really something to have that exposure to people across the country and the history that is part of that bigger picture, and to be part of the global discussion about identity-based violence and genocide. Lastly, not a formal one, but we all need to remember that on November 16th, Commissioner Pepcorn will be celebrating a birthday. High priority.
You got one more thing?
22 on the consent agenda, Mr. Chair. We skipped that. We have to go back and address that. Is that correct?
Just a vote.
Just to vote on it.
Oh, we need to vote on that, Susan? Is there a motion?
Move.
Is there a second?
Second.
A roll call vote?
Preston?
Aye.
Kolpak?
Aye.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. We're adjourned. Thanks.